There we go, live.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to talk about the 10 most important things you can do to achieve health. There's a lot of things that people can tell you to do, but there's actually 10 things that I think are well documented that will actually make a difference. So we're going to focus on those 10 things. More importantly, we're going to talk about why those 10 things might be important, why it is that they're so critical. Number one, it's a really good idea if you want to get and stay healthy to try to avoid chemical exposure. Now, chemicals include recreational drugs, including alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine, over-the-counter and prescription medications, as well as environmental toxins, not the least of which include pesticides, herbicides, volatile organic compounds, and heavy metals. Now, let's think about those chemicals and think about why it would be that we might have trouble dealing with them. Do you think those substances existed in concentrated quantities in the world of our ancient ancestors? No, if you go back in biological time, these things are relatively newly introduced. So there's never been pressure, evolutionary pressure, to develop the ability to deal with these substances. It's not like, oh, these things have been around forever, and the humans that had the ability to cope with them and deal with them and process them lived to reproduce, and the ones that couldn't handle them died. So you developed a strong survival of the fittest, if you will, preservation mechanism in relation to these chemicals. Since they're relatively new and our ancient ancestors were never exposed to them, there's never been any particular biological imperative of being able to deal with them. So it's not surprising that many of us have difficulties with various exposures to these substances. It's not all the same for everybody. Some people are more vulnerable than others. The problem is you don't know how vulnerable you are or which you're vulnerable to. So the most logical strategy is trying to, in general, minimize exposure altogether. So when we talk about recreational drugs, we take them voluntarily. You don't have to take nicotine, alcohol, or caffeine, do you? So we can choose not to consume those substances. Over-the-counter prescription drugs, most over-the-counter prescription drugs can be avoided. Now, I'm not saying that always. There are times where drugs may make the difference between life and death. There are extraordinary circumstances where drugs may be a net positive for you, but they're never taken without a price, which means the risk-reward ratio always has to be considered. And almost always in healthy people living healthfully, the need for medications can be reduced and largely eliminated. Environmental toxins like radiation, pesticides, herbicides, volatile organic compounds, heavy metals. It turns out there's one behavior more responsible than any other that's responsible for the net total load of toxins in human bodies, and that's the consumption of animal foods. Consumption of animal foods, you have a biological concentration of toxins inside the cells of animals because they, live day after week after month, and they're eating and being exposed to the same kind of environmental pressures that we are, plus we introduce things into their food supplies, we treat them, in fact, antibiotics, for example, the majority of antibiotics are actually given to animals. And so they accumulate these material in their cells. So when you kill an animal and you eat its meat or you drink its milk or eggs, you get its entire lifetime accumulation of poisons accumulated. So you could have anywhere up to 1,000 times the concentration of poisons in a calorie of animal foods compared to, say, a calorie of plant foods. So it can be dramatically higher as a consequence of this concept of biological concentration. Now, is that the only thing we have to do in order to assure optimum health is avoid chemicals? No. Turns out we also want to adopt a vegan diet because, in part, it helps us avoid chemicals because of the biological concentration of materials. But also, beyond chemicals, it turns out excess fat and excess protein, particularly excess animal fat and animal protein, have been intimately tied with a variety of diseases, not the least of which is cardiovascular disease, various forms of cancer, particularly breast, prostate, lung, and colon, and kidney disease. So, not to mention aggravating factor in autoimmune disorders, etc. So it turns out, especially concentrations of animal foods, particularly things like dairy products, nasty substances when it comes to achieving health. So we also recommend adopting a vegan diet. Number 3, the pleasure trap, chemicals that are added to food that make us fat, sick, and miserable. So the oil, the salt, the sugar, and the highly processed foods, including the flour products, which increase caloric density and fool our satiety mechanisms and lead us to developing the diseases of dietary excess, or as Dr. McDougall calls them, the diseases of kings. Because it used to be only the wealthy elite kings that could afford to eat the diet that caused the excess obesity and degenerative changes that we know are associated with it. Yes?
On the issue of flour,
at home we'll have Ezekiel bread spelled. Is that okay, or are you talking about Wonder Bread?
So anytime you take a grain and you grind it into a flour and then bake it into a bread, what you've done is you've dehydrated a product and increased its caloric density. So breads have about 1,500 calories a pound, more or less, whereas say your brown rice might only have 500 calories per pound serving. So the idea is with breads, if you're trying to increase caloric density so that people can gain weight, then that can be useful. Like if you have kids or athletes where you're trying to get more calories in less volume and trying to get the body to consume more, that would be a useful tool. On the other hand, if you're trying to lose weight or maintain weight, you want to be very careful about how highly you process foods. The more you process the food, the more tendency there is to fool the satiety mechanisms of the brain, the more likely you are to consistently overeat and become fat and sick as a consequence. Now, in the case of Ezekiel breads, these are sprouted breads that are still high moisture content, so they only have about half the caloric density that the flour bread, so it would be less bad. So if you're, again, if you're trying to lose weight or keep weight off, probably you want to stick to the whole simple grain. If you're trying to gain weight, then you may be able to get away with a little bit of this stuff. We would also recommend in general, we don't use wheat, rye, or barley. We try to avoid gluten just because so many people do seem to be sensitized, particularly to the forms of gluten that are available to people today. So again, something being less bad doesn't actually make it good, it just makes it less bad. And those higher moisture content breads would be less bad.
Nutritionally okay?
Yeah, nutritional density is actually quite good in all these foods. So it's not a question of not getting nutritional density, it's just a question of getting dietary excess, or if you happen to be sensitive to something like gluten, you wouldn't want to eat those products for sure. Number 4 on our list of 10 most important things you need to do to actually get and stay healthy. Regular whole body exercise. So these are things like walking, hiking, biking, swimming. It doesn't matter so much what you're doing. I personally favor a variety of activities if possible. But you do need to get around an hour a day on most days to build strength, stamina, flexibility, and also to help us dissipate for the stresses that we're not able to avoid fully. So regular whole body exercise is important. Now, did our ancient ancestors have struggle getting enough exercise? Did they have to join clubs in order to ensure that they... Or were they forced by pain of being hot or cold or hungry to have to move around? Yeah. So in other words, our ancestors never had to worry about these issues because it was kind of a condition of survival. If you didn't move, you got eaten, or you didn't get enough to eat, or you were in an environment that compromised your ability to survive. Today, we can get enough to eat, not get eaten, and never get off the couch. You can even have your food delivered off of, if you want to call it that, off of the internet. You could basically do nothing at all. People are, nowadays you get road rage incidents. People are outside the exercise club and they get into a fight over the approximated parking space. Because, well, they wouldn't want to walk all the way into the club to, Sleep, one of our most important activities, often underrated and undervalued. Sleep is when healing takes place. During the deep phase of non-REM deep sleep, if you don't get that non-REM deep sleep, there's a cascade of hormones that don't kick in that's associated with healing. So getting enough sleep, very important to healing. Think about fatigue. If you're fatigued, by definition, you didn't get the quality or quantity of sleep you needed to compensate for the stresses of your life. So, sleep is that rejuvenative phase where the body goes through the biochemical process associated with generating energy, converting ADP to ATP, etc. You need 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. You know you're getting enough sleep if you can wake spontaneously feeling refreshed. If you wake and have to take a highly addictive nervous system stimulant like caffeine in order to be able to function, you're probably not getting the sleep that you need. If you'd like to sleep less, then live healthfully. People on a health-promoting diet, people that exercise appropriately, people that live a healthy, stress-managed life need less sleep than people that are on a poor diet that have disruptive factors in their life. To sleep well, you want to sleep in a cool, dark, and quiet place. And, make this a priority. Get enough sleep. Did our ancient ancestors have trouble knowing when to go to sleep? No, they didn't have electric lights and TV and stuff. They went to sleep when it got dark, and they woke up when it got light, and that's a lot more than 6 hours in most parts of the world, most times of the year. What happened to the ancient ancestors that didn't like to sleep? They wanted to stay up and party. They got eaten. Because the animals that are awake at night are the carnivores, the ones that would be like nothing more than to make you suffer. So the ones that survived were the ones that crawled back in the deep part of some cave somewhere and got really quiet and still. And they managed to survive yet another night. Okay, the partiers, those are not your ancestors. Number 6 is fresh air and sunshine. Did our ancient ancestors have any problem getting enough fresh air and sunshine? No, because that's the only kind there was. There wasn't anything but fresh air, and they lived outside. They weren't behind plate glass windows trying to inhibit your vitamin D formation, so that necessary hormone that you need to maintain bone density, health, and vitality was diminished. Fresh air and sunshine, important. So what do we have to do today? Maybe we need to get outside, get exposed to sun, not burn obviously, but get exposed to sunshine and do vigorously important activities like gardening or hiking or walking or biking, etc. Yes?
Do you regard alarm clocks as impediments to health?
Well, what I would say is if you're having to wake with an alarm clock, it means you didn't go to bed early enough. So your goal should always be to go to bed early enough that you'll wake spontaneously feeling refreshed at the time you need to get up. Now, sometimes alarm clocks may have a psychological benefit because you don't have to worry that you're going to oversleep an important deadline. But your goal should always be, if I know I have to get up at, say, 6 a.m., what time do I have to go to, so I'll wake up at 5:55? And then you turn off the alarm clock. And you can always tell if you're getting enough sleep, you wake, you feel refreshed, you're ready to go. If you're awake, exhausted, the quality or quantity of your sleep may not be adequate for what you're getting. And if you're forcing yourself awake with an alarm clock consistently, that means you're consistently not getting enough sleep. And that, why are people overweight? In a large part, I believe it's because they don't eat enough and they don't sleep enough. If you eat so much low-density, high-nutrition food, there's not that much room left for anything else. And if you get enough rest that you're energetic, you want to exercise, you want to engage, you want to move around. And if you are sleep-deprived and you're eating a concentrated diet with too low a volume of food, you're going to be fat, sick, and miserable like everybody else. Number 7, now this is a little strange. On our list of 10 most important things, social stuff? Like, what the heck? Why would social things be so important to human beings in terms of maintaining optimal health? Because it turns out we're not wolverines. We are pack animals. We're social creatures. And it turns out if you have high self-efficacy regarding dealing with the classes of people you'll have to interact with as a human, that is the people you meet, the people you like, the people you love, that turns out to be really important psychologically to humans. Now that doesn't mean you have to have those active relationships in your life. For example, you don't have to have love in your life in order to be happy or healthy. But you have to believe that if the right person came along, you have the skills necessary to attract and maintain that relationship, or you will suffer psychologically. So if you believe I just haven't met the right person yet, that's fine. But if you believe I can't meet the right person because I'm damaged goods and I don't have what it takes to establish and maintain relationships, you need to work on those issues and resolving those issues in order to be able to fulfill our capacity to effectively interact socially with the people you meet, the people you like, and the people you love. Different classes of people, different skill sets, turns out important. He also says here you need to minimize exposure to energy vampires. Do you know that what the technical term energy vampires refers to? These are people that do what they do best, and that's make other people as fat, sick, and miserable as they are, so that by comparison they don't have to feel so bad. These are the people you have to learn to say the N-word to. No. Okay? And I know for a lot, particularly females, have trouble doing that because they think if they say the N-word, their face will shatter. They will just explode. It's not true. You have to be able to limit how much you bring on your plate to the amount that you can actually handle and be successful with. Number 8, nutritional excellence. It turns out if you eat a diet derived exclusively from whole natural foods that's free of sugar, oil, and salt, you get the quantity and quality of the nutrients you need in order to maintain optimal health, with a couple of exceptions. One is vitamin B12. B12 is found in nature only through bacterial association. And in the modern world, we're very hygienically oriented. We wash, we peel, because it turns out we don't like worms and parasites and diseases that come from filth. So we wash everything, but the consequence is we dramatically reduce our bacterial exposure unless you eat meat. Now with meat, there's tremendous bacterial exposure, especially all that nice feces that's ground right into your meat stuff. And so people that eat meat tend to get more exposure to vitamin B12. If you're on a vegan diet though, and you're fastidious about your hygiene, as you should be, you're not going to get enough B12 over your lifetime to maintain that exposure. In a natural setting, our ancestors didn't have to worry about it because they were eating stuff off the ground, off the thing, bugs and grubs. They weren't as fastidious about that. And so they got enough B12. We won't. And over enough years, we can eventually deplete B12, and it's a nasty problem. It relates to cellular production, nerve function, etc. So the one nutrient we recommend that vegans supplement is vitamin B12. 1,000 micrograms a day of methylcobalamin will meet virtually everybody's needs in order to sustain optimum B12. If people don't get outside in the sun, or they live really far north, they may not make enough vitamin D. So it's a simple blood test, 25 dehydroxyvitamin D. If the levels are low, we'll either get you in the sun more, which is the first choice, or if necessary, supplement to bring your levels up to normal. It's important, particularly for women. Low vitamin D is associated with increased risk for osteoporosis and various types of pain syndromes, as well as possibly cancer. And occasionally people have particular individual problems where they may not convert, for example, omega-3 fatty acid to docosahexoxanic acid, DHA. For those individuals, if they get symptoms or they have blood tests that show that there's a problem, you may resort to supplementation as well. But generally, we try to minimize the pills, the potions, the powders, focus on the diet, and for most people, that allows them to really thrive. Number 9, fast when appropriate. Did our ancient ancestors ever fast? And did they do it by choice or by force? By force. They fasted because spring came late and there wasn't anything to eat. They didn't do it by choice, they did it by force generally. So today we've learned to utilize fasting by choice. And that's what we do here at the True North Health Center. And it can be a very powerful tool in helping undo the consequences of dietary excess and the diseases of dietary excess that are associated with it, particularly the coronary artery disease, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the autoimmune diseases, and certain forms of cancer. If you're going to fast, we suggest it be done properly, under supervision, where you've had a proper history exam and lab. The reason we recommend that is because there's really no way to properly guide a fast if you don't have baseline data to compare back to. You've got to differentiate between a healing crisis, which is a good thing generated by the body and its attempt to get well, and a problem. So just because you're doing something natural doesn't guarantee you're going to have a good result. Now, one thing we've done at the True North Health Center is we've gotten to be good at fasting supervision. We've done it for 32 years. We've had over 15,000 people come in, and everybody that's come in to fast that's walked in has been able to walk out so far. And so we're trying to keep it that way. And the way we do that is we follow very strict protocols that are involved in fasting safety. In fact, we're just submitting a paper on fasting safety to the scientific literature that demonstrates just how safe and effective this can be when it's done right in the appropriately selected patients. Number 10, education and inspiration. Now, why do we need education and inspiration on an ongoing basis? I argued with our psychologist, Dr. Lau, about this. Of course, it turned out he was right. It turns out, I said, and we argued about this when we were going through school, I said, look, you get a sick person and you teach them how to get well, and they're so grateful when they get well, they stick to it, and that's it. And he said, well, no, that's not how people work. The way it's going to work is people are going to do it, they get well, and then they think, well, I'm better now, I don't have to be so strict, and they're going to slip and slide off, and they're going to have to go over and over again. It's going to be an ongoing battle. And I said, that's ridiculous. People don't work like that. He said, of course they do. I said, no, they don't. He said, yes, they do. I said, no, they don't. It turned out he was right. Really annoys me. It turns out you need ongoing education and inspiration because you live in a world designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable. You live in a world that's designed to give you what you want, not what you need. And what you want is how can you indulge in the pleasure trap and not pay the price? And what you need is to learn how to escape the pleasure trap so you can get healthy and happy. And so whether you use books or tapes or come to places like the True North Health Center, it turns out compliance is accentuated when you give people ongoing support. Now, we've recognized that, and now we're going to begin to study it. One of the things that we're excited about through the True North Health Foundation, our nonprofit public education entity, is that we have a new website that will be coming out. Right now, this goes to our current site, fasting.org, but it will be going to our new site shortly. And one of the things on that site is not only will it be a fasting compendium with all the world's research on fasting and our interpretation of it, but it will also have different channels of support. And we're going to start experimenting and looking at what can you do to help people sustain these efforts over the long run, because it turns out that's a big key. You come here and get well, but you have to go out there and stay well. And so we're going to be looking at what can be done to help accentuate that. That's an area that needs a lot of attention. So what I want to do now is just very briefly go through what we've said, the 10 most important things you can do to get and stay healthy. Avoid chemicals, adopt a vegan diet, avoid the processed foods or the pleasure trap chemicals, engage in regular exercise, get the sleep you need, get out and get fresh air and sunshine, develop effective interpersonal skills, take your B12, fast if you need to, and continue to educate and inspire yourself. If you do that, you'll be so healthy and happy you won't have time to worry about all the other nonsense. Klaus?
Your new website, does it have a name yet?
Yeah, the new website's going to be found at fasting.org. Right now, that tracks to our current website, but it will be soon. We'll be launching the new site. This new site's developed. We're just loading the content in there right now. And on that site, there's, as I said, 2 channels. All the information, research on fasting, a summary of the nutritional information, and then channels to provide ongoing support. That's the main goal of the new True North Health Foundation's website. For those of you that want to help us with our research, you can. If you select True North, which is one word, True North Health, as your Amazon company, they will donate through Amazon Smile. Amazon Smile will donate 0.5% of everything you ever purchase on Amazon to the foundation. And that's the way it doesn't cost you anything. It can be very helpful if you go on to smile.amazon.com, select this as your charity from the drop-down list. You just have to do it once, then it remembers you. And that would be much appreciated. If you are involved in charitable trusts or you make donations to companies, you can do those donations to the True North Health Foundation. You get the same tax deductions you would from any nonprofit entity, and it would help us do our work. And we'll do a lot more effective use of that than it would be in conventional sources.
Yeah,
Yes.
we have a question on Facebook
Sir.
Live. You said it, but maybe they logged on late. How many B12 a day?
We recommend 1,000 micrograms, that's mcg, of methylcobalamin per day. And the reason is, it's probably more than many people need, but that 1,000 micrograms a day will meet almost everybody's need. And the reason that happens, 1 or 2% will be absorbed just by sheer diffusion. So with that dosing load of vitamin B12, even if you don't have active intrinsic factor, you'll still usually get enough B12 absorbed in order to be able to meet needs. So that's why we do it. 1,000 micrograms a day. You can use a liquid, like we have the pure encapsulation makes a vegan liquid. They also have vegan capsules now in 1,000 microgram dosages. And so that's the recommendation we make. There's probably lots of brands out there. I'm sure many of them would work as well.
And this question asker said LC for her 18-year-old boy as well, same amount?
We just recommend 1,000 micrograms a day.
For everyone.
B12 for anyone. The good news about B12, it's water soluble. There's no toxicity issues associated with vitamin B12. The only thing that might happen if you take more than you need is you're wasting some money in making your urine a little bit rich in B12. There's no toxicity. It's not like vitamin D or something where you have to be careful to maintain minimum effective dosages. B12 is not a problem in that regard.
Patricia says, great seminar, thank you. Silly question, do you plant-based eaters need to count calories?
No, what the beautiful thing about eating an exclusively whole food diet that's free of sugar, oil, and salt is people can eat to satiety and not have to weigh, measure, and count calories in order to achieve optimum health. Now the good news is, for those of you that are energy-conserving fat storage devices, particularly say women that have estrogen, whose biological system is set up to hold on to a higher percentage of calories of fat than say males because they have estrogen, which is a fat storage hormone. There's some tricks you can use which can dramatically help you if just eating whatever you want, whenever you want doesn't work. You can eat your low-density foods first, so have a big salad, then have a big bunch of steamed vegetables, then have a more reasonable quantity of the complex carbohydrates. If you're still hungry, go back and have another salad. If you eat enough low-density food, you're going to feel naturally full. You're not going to have an issue. And if even that's not enough, and there are some women, they're just such efficient energy store. These are the people, they walk by the buffet table and get a great gain a pound. They have a bad dream, they go up a dress size, you know what I mean? What you can do is you can use intermittent fasting, which is really intermittent feeding. And if you go onto our website at healthpromoting.com and download Dr. Morano's article, which he talks about is narrow the feeding window. So you don't eat, say, before 9, and you don't eat after 6, say. And maybe one day a week you limit yourself to raw fruits and vegetables to reduce your caloric intake to 600 calories. That can facilitate getting those last few pounds of weight off that maybe doesn't want to come off on its own. But generally, we don't have to weigh, we don't have to measure, unless we're talking about foods that an individual might have a particular sensitivity to, like let's say nuts or something that are very rich. We try to limit the quantity to an ounce a day. If nuts are a trigger food for a person, maybe we don't even use those. We'll use seeds or something else that doesn't stimulate them to overeating. You have to remember, not everybody's the same. So we have to modify the diet a little bit. Now, one thing you can do, for those of our people that are watching this on Facebook that aren't here in this room right now, is that we do offer a free consultation to patients. If they want to fill out the registration forms, they can go on to our website, healthpromoting.com, fill out the registration forms, it gets us their medical history, then they can call in and I'll be happy to talk to them without cost to determine whether this type of approach might be relevant to them. So that's a tool. Yes?
In Dr. Barnard's videos, he talks about how you have to go to sleep at a good time, like at 10 o'clock, so that you can get your time in. But I'm a night bird. I like to go to sleep, late. Does it matter what time you go
Well,
to
what
sleep?
time do you typically go to sleep?
1.
And what time do you wake up?
30, 9-ish.
Okay, I wouldn't be as concerned for a person that goes to bed and gets up and has enough sleep. It is true, though, that it's easier to go to bed earlier than to wake up later. It's also true that unless you black out your room, the light and other stuff can sometimes interfere with getting the quality of sleep. But there are people that do, their internal clocks are a little bit different. And, and if that works for you and you're maximizing health and those issues, I don't have an objection if you're actually getting the quality and quantity of sleep that you need. But for generally, most people do seem to do better when they go to bed closer to sundown and wake up around sunup, and that there's probably some biology to that makes sense. And I got a lot of respect for Dr. Bernard, and so if he's telling you that there's some science that suggests going to bed earlier, he's probably right. I'm just not as aware of it. I don't,
Okay, thank you.
A lot of people are writing awesome, and thank you, Dr. Felicia would like to know if someone with diabetes can fast at your center.
Yeah, type 2 diabetes, which represents, 95% of diabetics. These are people that have adequate insulin production, but it doesn't work well because there's something called insulin resistance. And the diet that makes you fat causes insulin resistance. So if the dietary changes and exercise alone are not bringing blood sugar levels down adequately or quickly enough, then we can use water-weighted fasting. Water fasting reduces insulin resistance powerfully. A significant percentage of our type 2 diabetics will achieve normal blood sugar levels without medication use. But in order to sustain it, you have to be prepared to do dangerous and radical things like eat good and exercise. So you have to continue to eat an exclusively plant food diet without added sugar, oil, and salt. You have to be willing to engage in exercise like walking, hiking, biking, swimming regularly. You have to get enough sleep. What you're going to find is this theme gets repeated over and over and over again, regardless of the conditions we're talking about. You want to get healthy, you have to live healthy. Healthy living involves diet, sleep, and exercise, and if necessary, fasting.
Colleen says that she never gets adequate sleep and drinks coffee daily. What is the best way to get off of caffeine?
Well, in my experience, the best way is just stop drinking it, and you go through terrific headaches and all that kind of stuff. If you wean it down over a few days, maybe the headaches are somewhat mitigated or reduced. As far as if you can't do it on your own, then what I suggest is you come here, go through a water-only fast. Preferably try to wean down the coffee as much as you can before you get here, so I don't have to listen to you whine about it. But the fact is that fasting is an effective tool. Most smokers, for example, by the second day of fasting are not complaining about withdrawal effects. Some say it's because they're so miserable from the fast they're not thinking about it. It's not really true, though. Fasting can be a very intense process, but if you prepare properly for fasting, you do the fasting in a safe and supportive environment, it can be a very effective tool in helping break these addictions.
There's lots of questions if you don't mind asking. Again, they're
How many
asking.
people do you have on this list?
Right now, it's just saying 67, but at the replay, there's going to be thousands. Tina said, how much B12 for a 3-year-old? Is it the same amount?
Yeah, we don't, obviously a child is probably going to have a proportionally lower need for B12. And it is true that for simplicity purposes, we always say 1,000 micrograms a day. But remember, for the vast majority of people, the actual need for B12 is only a relatively few micrograms. And because children, for example, don't tend to have the same gastric damage that's done of adults, you can probably get by with substantially lower dosage. But again, our general recommendation, 1,000 micrograms a day. If you want to reduce that dosage in children based on volume size, if they're a third the size, then you'd need a third the amount of B12.
We have a couple of thyroid questions. Does this way of eating help with thyroid, or is there anything people on thyroid medication should know regarding this way of eating?
So it turns out the HLA-DQ gene associated with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the majority of hypothyroidism, is the same gene associated with gliadin or gluten sensitivity. The theory is that people that have this gene and they eat gluten, the body's immune system begins to react. Some people get what's called celiac disease. That's about 1% of the population. But even if your body isn't attacking your colon, your body can also attack your thyroid. And that's what Hashimoto's thyroiditis is, essentially your immune system attacking your thyroid, taking it out. And so it may be that gluten is a triggering mechanism for some people. And so, there's evidence that suggests that might be true. We find those patients that eliminate gluten from their diet oftentimes do better. Fasting can also help impact neuroendocrine function in general and thyroid function in specifically, although if you've been on thyroid replacement therapy for a decade or more, it's likely you'll still need some level of support because there's kind of a negative feedback that goes on. But remember, if it's thyroiditis or if it's arthritis or if it's colitis, these are always your immune system attacking your body. So what we do to treat that is try to get rid of the gut leakage, which is caused by the free radicals damage to the animal lining, eliminate the dietary antigens and free radicals that cause it. And then we use fasting a lot to heal, and then we get you on a good diet that's low in antigens, and lo and behold, a lot of people can get dramatic improvement as a consequence.
Cynthia wants to know if you could fast on your own, and I'd like everybody watching, first of all, thank you for watching, to know that Dr. Goldhamer is doing a free live webinar tonight on water-only fasting, and if you look at my Facebook page, there's a link to that registration. So the question is, can you fast on your own?
So yeah, I mean, everybody fasts every day. They have their dinner and then they don't eat again till the next day, and they begin the initiation of the fasting process. We recommend that water-only fasting be done under medical supervision, because you do want to have an exam lab. You want to be monitored in order to make it safe and effective. However, intermittent fasting and the modifications of the diet can be done by people on their own, and they can go to our website and read all about that. That's a little different talk than what I'm giving today.
Wonderful. Sarah would like to know if you feel that any exercise is good exercise, or is cardio, elevated heart rate exercise, extremely important?
Well, there's three things you're looking to do with exercise. You're looking in order to get flexibility, strength, and conditioning. So cardiovascular really is great for flexibility and for heart muscle, respiration, etc. So your cardiovascular health. But you also want to do some stretching and some strengthening. Now, some people can do that because they do gardening or whole body activities. Other people will incorporate that with a yoga practice or other things. So lots of different ways you can get all three, strength, flexibility, as well as conditioning. But you do want to do things that make you breathe hard, that put some load on the joints and the tissues, and that encourage flexibility. So I personally like to encourage a variety of whole body activities: walking, hiking, biking, swimming, dancing. These are the things that are extremely helpful. There's some higher risk behavior, like I play basketball, which I'm not necessarily recommending in terms of the safety profile, but it certainly works on all aspects of health and conditioning. Yes?
Dr. Goldhamer, I know that it's really difficult, or maybe even impossible, for people that have mental health issues to fast because of the medications they're on. Have you ever been able to work with that?
Yes, we do work with a lot of patients that have significant mental illness. Depression and anxiety are the two most common mental debilities. And if you read Anatomy of an Epidemic, excellent book, it explains how we've created an epidemic of disease around the use of things like serotonin inhibitor medications like Prozac and these drugs. And they talk about how these drugs deactivate the D2 receptors in the brain, so when you try to withdraw them, you get the very symptoms you're trying to manage, like anxiety and depression. Drugs that were designed for short-term emergency use are now being used on a long-term basis with devastating consequences. So we have a lot of patients coming in trying to get off of their antidepressant and anxiety medications. We use a combination of fasting, an exclusively plant food diet, exercise, and behavioral cognitive therapy with people like Dr. Lyle, who's a psychologist who is brilliant. And the combination of all that, for many, is successful at helping them stabilize and eliminate the devastating effects of long-term medication use when it comes to dealing with anxiety and depression. Also, by getting people sleeping properly, getting them off the caffeine, getting them off the drugs that oftentimes have these side effects, you can make a big effort, but it's never easy, and it's not often quick. So you have to have a very dedicated and motivated patient if they're serious about trying to stabilize themselves when they're dealing with depression and anxiety. There's other difficulties. There's quite a literature on the use of water fasting in conditions like schizophrenia and others. These patients can be difficult to manage clinically, and so when we do treat them, it's on an individual basis, and it really has to be a patient that has a high propensity to success. So we're pretty selective about who we're working with there, but we do have a history of working with some of these patients that have done very well. Yes?
Before you mentioned the term resistant hypertension,
Yeah.
what exactly is that, and how effective is water fasting with dealing with that?
Yeah, water-only fasting is the most effective treatment that's ever been demonstrated in treating high blood pressure in humans. And resistant hypertension just means that despite the fact that they've put them on 5 drugs, they still have hypertension, okay? So, I mean, that's how I'm defining it. And that may not be the technical definition. But, you know, some people's blood pressure is quick and easy. You know, they're sodium sensitive. You get them off the salty crap that they're eating and their blood pressure normalizes. Other people have to go through a more aggressive intervention to normalize their blood pressure. But who are we getting here? We're getting the people that went to programs that usually work, but like John McDougall will tell you, you know, if he has a patient whose blood pressure doesn't drop enough, he'll apologize to them, and he'll tell them, I'm terribly sorry, but because your blood pressure is so stubborn, you have to go to Goldhamer's place. And it's like, he's all apologetic about it. I'm so sorry. You know, it's like, thanks, John. You know. But he'll send you somebody because, despite doing a starch-based diet, it's still not quite enough to get that thing to come down. So they'll come in here, tighten the screws even further on the diet, we reduce the sodium even further, and we'll use fasting. And fasting is the most effective way. If you want to look at the 2 papers we've published, they're on our website, medically supervised water-only fasting in the treatment of hypertension, and medically supervised water-only fasting in the treatment of borderline hypertension. Average effect size of over 60 points in stage 3 hypertension, the largest effect anybody's ever shown. 174 people will lower their blood pressure enough to eliminate medication. Published in JNPT and JACM. Yes?
I do not have high blood pressure, so is it okay if I eat a little coconut aminos or miso, and does not eating salt help you lose weight?
Yeah, no. You don't want to eat, just because you're not yet sick doesn't mean you want to just keep pushing the limit until you get sick. And it's all, TikTok, it's a question of time. That's why the majority of people living in the United States will develop hypertension if they live long enough to retire. So something that's a toxin is always a toxin. A smaller amount of toxin is a less amount of toxin. So we don't need to be eating any of these highly processed foods that tend to inculcate a desire for those foods, lead to overeating and other problems. It's just like animal foods. Not everybody's going to get heart disease because they're loading up on greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh, because some of those people will shunt that fat to their colon and they'll get colon cancer instead. Okay? It's like people asking, would I rather burn to death or drown? There may be advantages to one over the other, but you end up dead either way. Yes?
Where'd you get your bedside manner training?
Dr. Lyle says I have a reptile nervous system. I'm not sure what that means.
And could you do me a favor and talk a little faster?
Yeah, I can't really. That's about as fast as it goes. It's only got that one speed there.
What is the issue with caffeine or coffee? Can you separate coffee, caffeine?
Yeah, well, caffeine, as we know, is a highly addictive nervous system drug. And so that's why when you try to stop, you get those terrible headaches and stuff. And withdrawal, like any addict, it's difficult getting off of it. And it has a 17-hour half-life, so even the coffee you drink in the morning affects the quality of your sleep later at night. Caffeine has all kinds of problems. It increases endogenous cholesterol production. There's all kinds of things that are thought to be a problem with it. Now, coffee is not just caffeine, but 2,000 other chemicals that are highly acid irritating. Ask anybody with gastritis how it feels to drink coffee. They'll tell you how irritating it is. Well, it's just as irritating to you. You just have a little bit of mucus protection left, so you may not notice as much. You can tolerate and get away with it. I wouldn't recommend that coffee be used at any time for anybody, because it's not a health promoting food. Now they're going to say, oh, but there's some antioxidants in it. It's like what they say with red wine. There's resveratrol. Oh, great. There's a little bit of antioxidant left. Where does the resveratrol come in red wine? From the grapes, from the skin of the grapes. Just eat the grapes if you want to have that grape. The fact there's a little bit left in the wine that hasn't been completely destroyed doesn't make it a health food. They tell you that alcohol has a blood thinning effect. So if you're on a greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh diet at risk for a clotting stroke, and you drink wine and take an aspirin, you have a slightly lower risk of a clotting stroke. That might be true. But you have an increased risk of a bleeding stroke, and there's no evidence that all-cause mortality is reduced because you take these substances. They're not health foods. They're not healthy for you. They should not be used.
Sky wants to know, what about green tea or matcha green tea?
These, again, lower dosages of caffeine. So they'll say, well, but it's got less, so it's less toxic. So something that's less bad isn't good. It's less bad. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I would argue it might be less bad, so don't do it at all.
What about other detox modalities such as far-infrared saunas?
Right, there's probably nothing more powerful for detoxification than nothing. In fact, that's one of the criticisms of fasting by some. They say, well, it's so efficient, your body wouldn't know what it's doing, and it's going to dump stuff too bad and it'll cause damage, unless you take their proprietary treatments or substances. Then I guess it's okay. Now, is the skin an eliminative organ? Yes, but it's a relatively minor one. If you think about the bulk of toxins, where are they processed? It's in the blood, processed by the kidneys, eliminated in the urine. So if you want to know where does most of your toxins come out, it's actually the urine. The stools are really just a little stercobilinogen and stuff from the liver and the stuff that didn't get absorbed. That's not a main detoxifying system for the body. That stuff isn't even in the body until once it gets in the body and it gets into the bloodstream and the body then processes it, urine is going to be the main. So yeah, you can get a little detoxification from the skin, but I think it's really a secondary source of elimination rather than a primary source of elimination. So all these modalities that we do, yeah, they may have beneficial effects, and you can debate that, and there's still not much research, proving it. But the point is, we already know where the bulk of this change comes from. which is the body healing itself through diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting. So if I do the diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting and we don't get somebody well, then we can look at whatever else is necessary, including medicine, surgery, whatever. But in the case of high blood pressure, I'm waiting for the first person that won't respond to diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting that will respond to some magic potion, powder, and treatment. I haven't seen it yet, and I've only been doing it 32 years, so I keep waiting. It's just like, wait. Well, what if I can't lose weight? Well, yeah, that would be very interesting. I would love to write that case report. I haven't found that person yet. If you're that person, come on in.
Donna is asking how safe it is to use coffee enemas for detox and how often.
Yeah, I'm not a big proponent of the coffee enema. The theory is that it's going to stimulate the liver to dump and that's going to facilitate a healing response. So I don't like, I like to avoid the use of any kind of bowel laundry stuff, including enemas and clones, if we can. There may be times where that isolated individual therapeutic intervention might be necessary, but I wouldn't take coffee orally or up your rectum. The fact is you're still absorbing the caffeine, same all the negative benefits. The fact that you can make your liver throw up, is an interesting theory, but it's not something that I'm particularly advocating. But I know other people do, and when they actually publish data that shows that it's consistently effective, then we might consider putting coffee up people's rectum. At this point, I haven't seen evidence to support me. Yes, Rakesh?
Can you talk a little bit more about fasting and cancer, for example?
Yes.
Of serious diseases and how long you have to fast? And is it true that sometimes you have to tie up people to make them fast?
Okay, well, we don't actually tie up people to do that. That's not, apparently there's some, Dr. Lyle says you can't do that kind of stuff, so we don't do it. It's outside the protocol of treatment. We only work with voluntary, highly conscientious, motivated people that actually are willing to do what it takes to get well under their own volition, not through our force. So I'll put that rumor. That's not true. Second of all, as far as how long to fast, it's a very individual thing. Sometimes it's a short fast, sometimes it's a long fast, sometimes it's several long fasts. And sometimes fasting isn't enough in and of itself to deal with a particular problem. So it's a really individual situation. Unfortunately, we don't always know in advance either. We kind of know in hindsight. Like when I look back and then the person's well and however long it was, I say, oh, that's what I thought. I'm brilliant in hindsight. Predicting, not so much, So we have enough experience to get some general ideas. We know certain parameters. We don't want people to be too thin or emaciated. We don't want people to run out of reserves. So we monitor all that really carefully. We know from experience that some conditions typically do take longer fasts, particularly solid masses that you're trying to get breaking down are usually longer, not shorter. But just as soon as I think I got it down, somebody will come along and get well really quickly, just to make me wrong. I'll give you an example too. I had a woman here. She was 220 pounds, hypertension, diabetic, arthritis, young woman, young babies, and so she's like late 30s, early 40s. She came to see me as an outpatient. I said, well, what we need to do is bring you in, wean you off your medications, put you through a fast. It'll be 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll get you educated, do the diet. And she said, well, she didn't want to come in and do a fast. And I said, well, you're probably wasting your time then because it's not going to happen. The changes you'd have to make are too significant. You're just not going to be able to do it. And she said, well, sure she could. Just tell her what to do and she'll do it. And I said, yeah, you're not going to do it. And we're like back and forth and arguing. So finally the visit for the time, I said, fine. So I gave her the diet. She goes out. She also had some chronic back pain, so she came to see me to get some manipulative therapy for the back a couple weeks later, and sure enough, she lost 4 pounds. And target weight loss for a woman is about 2 pounds a week. So I thought, oh, maybe she's compliant. And so this went on for 20 weeks. In 20 weeks, she lost 40 pounds, okay? And normalized her blood pressure, she got off her meds. Now, long story short, she ended up losing all the weight. She lost 80 pounds, completely got off medications, and I swear to this day she did it just to make me wrong. She never fasted a single day, and she completely, turned herself around. So sometimes people can do it. It's difficult, and so fasting can speed things up, can make it easier. The education that goes along with the fasting experience, I think, is important. Just being around other people that don't think you're a whack job just because you're trying to eat well and be healthy. A lot of people feel very socially isolated because they're like the only person they know that believes in healthful living.
Would you
And so-
equate 1 day of fasting with 2 days of juice fasting?
I wouldn't. Water fasting is a much more intense and sometimes miserable experience than juice fasting or modified feeding, but it can also be significantly more effective. But depending on the patient, I wouldn't try to say that 1 day equals this because it varies too much. But it is true that in a week or two of fasting, you can see changes that sometimes takes months of healthy eating. And in some people, even though they've been eating healthfully, it's not enough. Who should come to the True North Health Center? 1, they're trying to eat well but just can't do it. It's too difficult. So we're going to help them make it easier. They've done the diet, but they're still suffering with problems that are you're just not resolving quick enough. They need to come to the center. Or people that are healthy and want to stay that way. And I actually think those are the people that get the very best benefit of fasting. People that are healthy, they're living healthy, they just use it as both a diagnostic and therapeutic break and a chance to recommit and refocus. I do fasting every year. I hate fasting. I don't like having to rest and take time off and stop playing basketball. It's not something that I look forward to, but I do find it dramatically helpful, even though in my case I've been fortunate. I've done it since I was 16 years old. I never had the bad habits. And I do feel it has a profound positive effect in maintaining health. Can't prove it yet, but soon I will. Because when we start coming up with these non-invasive diagnostic markers, you can bet that we're going to start finding that there's all kinds of things associated with people that do periodic fasting.
Okay, for the healthy person, what do you recommend for fasting? Is it you do 1 week a year?
Well, what I do, what a lot of the staff do, is we'll take time off every year. We'll fast for a week. If at the end of a week we're feeling good, there's no healing crisis, we call it a day and then come off the fast. If, on the other hand, that's enough to stimulate a healing crisis, we keep going however long it takes. Okay? So I use it, if after a week of fasting and a healthy person, they're politically stable, a lot of times that's all you need to do. On the other hand, there's some people that come in, we're doing a 4-week fast and then we refeed them and we do another, and it can take a bunch to get them down. One question you can ask yourself is, how close are you to your optimal weight? So a person that's at optimum weight and fast probably isn't going to have to fast very long. But let's say a person's 20 pounds overweight. Well, we know it takes about 3 weeks to get down to optimum weight, so it's not surprising it might take 3 weeks of fasting to get rid of all the stuff that's associated with all the cells that shouldn't be there to begin with.
But I didn't think you were using it for weight loss.
We're not. The point I'm making is if you're asking me how long will it take to get rid of the toxins, which is what we are using it for, there's a pretty good chance until you're at your optimum weight, you're still going to have a pretty heavy load of excess material in your system. Does that make sense? If you eat the diet, like this woman lost 80 pounds diet and lifestyle, she doesn't need to fast right now necessarily. Okay? She did it on her own, grinding it out 2 pounds a week for 40 weeks. All right? No problem. But let's say that she asked me, where she's still, say, over her optimum weight. If I had to guess, whatever we do, diet, fasting, however it is, we want to get you to your optimum weight. We want you lean and mean and fully functional and healthy. Yes?
How do you know what your optimal weight is?
Well, there's different calculations. I mean, most women know within about an ounce of where they want to be. But, men, we have no idea. It's like you talk about women. If women lose 50 pounds and go to work, the other women are not always supportive. You know what I mean? It's like they don't go, oh dear, I'm so proud of you, and how can I help and support you in your efforts to maintain? It's like, oh, here she comes, that bitch. They know why you lost weight because you're a mate poaching whore. And they're going to bring you cupcakes and tell you where you're going to get your protein from, and you're no fun anymore, and it's not good to be a fanatic. Men lose 50 pounds and go to work, the other men don't notice. They have no idea. And if they do notice, they don't care. And so it's a little easier for the men than the women, because the women are dealing with all this psychosocial overlay. As far as optimum weight, the weight you feel the best at, you function the best at, your values are good. Percent body fats we can talk about, but even there's some variation. Women are going to obviously be higher than men, and there's some debate about exactly what those numbers are, but I can assure you the weight that you feel the best at, you function the best at, oftentimes approximates with optimum weight. And remember, so weight on the scale isn't very reliable, because if you work out and you have a lot of muscle, you may be heavier, but you're still going to look kind of lean and mean. Okay? So I would go more by how you feel and how you function than worrying specifically about the absolute markings on the scale.
2 questions. Sarah wants to know your thoughts on supplements like vitamin D, as some doctors view it as completely unnecessary to even test.
Well, I disagree. And it's a good thing that other doctors believe that, because if other doctors believed all the accurate information, there would be no reason to have us here. So I appreciate the fact that other people disagree with us, even when they're wrong. Testing is useful because if you do not have a deficiency, you do not want to take vitamin D. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble nutrient that excess is not a good thing. On the other hand, if you have a true deficiency, let's say your levels are less than 20 and you don't have adequate stores, we know that there's evidence suggesting you have a higher incidence of things like osteoporosis and other problems. So what we would do is want to correct that ideally from the sun, which is the best way to get vitamin D. Go out in the sun, don't burn, but get enough exposure to bring your levels up. But if you are not able to do that, maybe you live in Northern California where 6 months of the year you can't make vitamin D in the sun. Then if necessary, we would supplement the least amount of vitamin D supplement needed to bring your levels back into target range.
And David wants to know, oil or no oil when cooking?
No oil. So we don't use any oil, including olive oil or coconut oil or any other oil. If you want to cook, you can look up, what's the name of your new book?
The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss. But,
Okay, if you look at The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, what you're going to find is instructions on how to make delicious foods without oil.
Yep.
By using soup stock, other liquids, and all the techniques necessary to make food taste good, but it doesn't require any oil. You can also look in the Health Promoting Cookbook or the Bravo Cookbook. So I think
And Kathy Fisher
and
has a
Kathy
new
Fisher has a
cookbook.
fabulous new cookbook out also that will deal with these issues.
Right.
The point is, I think any exclusively plant food SOS free cookbook is going to help you develop techniques to make food that tastes good but doesn't require the use of any oil, salt, or sugar added.
Right. This is a great question. I get it a lot. Yvonne wants to know, what do people do that can't get to True North?
Okay, so one thing that they should all do, because it doesn't cost them anything, is go online, fill out the forms, and call me and let me talk to them about what the strategy they might be able to do on their own is. For many people, they don't have to necessarily come to True North in order to make substantial improvements in their health. We have doctors on our staff, like Dr. Clapper, that are happy to do phone consultations, and they can act as a consultant and help bridge the gap between you and the doctor that you're working with. Also, sometimes we can refer people to people in their area that might be knowledgeable or helpful. Or to resources that they can use, including the material that's on our website. Health results from healthful living, diet, sleep, and exercise. It's true, it's harder doing it on your own. It takes longer when you don't have the benefits of fasting. But you can make these kinds of changes. You just have to be willing to pay the price.
This has been wonderful.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Goldhamer.